You ever meet someone who thinks the whole world belongs to them? Well, I did. Her name was Karen, and she was the kind of neighbor who believes every road, every fence, and every inch of land should bend to her will, even if it wasn't hers. I live on a quiet stretch of farmland just outside a small town in Missouri. Life's simple here. A few cows, a red barn, and a dirt driveway that leads to peace. But peace doesn't last long when you live next to the HOA queen herself. When she started driving through my farm like it was her personal shortcut, I warned her once, then twice, and after that, I set a little trap that she'll never forget. And the way this story ends had the entire HOA board speechless. I've lived on my family's farm for over 20 years. It's a modest 15-acre plot, chickens, corn, and quiet mornings. My property line sits right behind an upscale suburban community managed by a homeowners association. You know, the kind where everyone has matching mailboxes, and people get fined for leaving their trash can out too long. I'd never had problems with them until Karen moved in. She was new to the neighborhood, but within weeks, she became the self-proclaimed president of the HOA, the kind of person who wears sunglasses at dusk and talks to you like she's running for mayor. At first, she was polite. "Oh, you must be the farmer next door," she said with that tight smile. I nodded, said hello, and went on my way. But then the problems started. One morning, I walked out to find tire tracks cutting right across my pasture. Not near the edge, right through the middle. My fence gate was unlatched, and it looked like someone had driven straight from the neighborhood onto my land. I followed the tracks, and sure enough, they led to the cul-de-sac behind Karen's house. I thought maybe it was a one-time mistake. Maybe some teenager lost control. So I fixed the gate and moved on. But the next day, it happened again, and again the day after that. By the end of the week, my grass was torn up like a racetrack, and I had deep ruts across the property. That's when I decided to set up my trail camera to see what was going on. And guess who it caught? Karen, in her shiny white SUV, smiling like she owned the place. The next afternoon, I caught her pulling out of my field. I waved her down, keeping my cool. "Ma'am, this is private property. You can't keep driving through here." She tilted her head, that fake politeness dripping from her voice. "Oh, don't be dramatic. It's just a shortcut. The main road gets so busy in the mornings." I explained that it wasn't a public road and she was damaging my land. She rolled her eyes and said, "You farmers and your rules. It's just dirt." That's when I realized what kind of person I was dealing with. So I called the sheriff's department. They came out, took a report, and left a warning note on her door. But Karen didn't take warnings seriously. 2 days later, she was back, this time honking as she drove through like she was mocking me. That's when I decided. If she wanted a lesson, she was going to get one. I didn't want to do anything illegal or dangerous, just something to make a point. So I went down to the hardware store and bought a set of retractable spike strips, the kind they use for vehicle tests. Safe if you're careful, but not fun to drive over. Then I put up a clear warning sign that said, "Private property. Do not enter. Road under maintenance." I made sure everything was perfectly legal. Then I waited. Sure enough, the next morning, right around 7:45, I heard that familiar engine. I stood on my porch with my coffee and watched Karen's SUV roll down the slope. The moment she hit the strip, pft, pft, 2 tires deflated instantly. She slammed on the brakes, jumped out, and started screaming. "You did this on purpose!" she shrieked, pointing at me from across the field. I walked up slowly, calm as could be. "Ma'am, there's a sign right there. You drove past it." She was furious. "I'll have you reported to the HOA. You'll pay for this." I chuckled. "Good luck with that. I don't live in your HOA." That's when she realized she had no power here. But she wasn't done. She called the sheriff again, this time on me. The deputy showed up, looked at the signs, the damage, and the tire marks, and then turned to her and said, "Ma'am, this is private property. You're trespassing." You're lucky he didn't press charges. Karen's face went pale. She tried to argue, but the deputy cut her off. "If you drive through here again, we'll be towing your car off his land, at your expense." That was the first time I saw her speechless. But Karen didn't stop there. Oh no, she took it to the HOA board. A week later, I received a neatly typed letter demanding I restore community access through my property. As if my farm was some kind of public road. The letter was signed Karen M., HOA President, so I wrote back. Politely, of course. Dear HOA, this property is privately owned and not under HOA jurisdiction. Further contact regarding this matter will be considered harassment. And just for fun, I attached a copy of the sheriff's report with her name on it. I didn't hear back for a while, but word spread fast around the neighborhood. People started stopping by my farm stand, laughing about Karen's shortcut disaster. Turns out I wasn't the only one she'd been bothering. She'd fined her neighbors for things like having the wrong shade of mailbox paint or leaving a garden hose visible. So when the story got out, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. Several neighbors showed up demanding she step down. Apparently it got heated. One guy even brought photos of her SUV being towed off my property. By the end of that week, Karen was no longer HOA president. She stopped driving through my land, stopped waving at me from her driveway, and started keeping to herself. A few months later, her house went up for sale. The morning the moving trucks pulled out, I stood on my porch, sipping coffee, watching her drive off one last time. On the main road this time. Peace had finally returned to my farm, and I couldn't help but smile at the irony. All it took to stop her entitlement was a few spike strips and a lesson in boundaries. Sometimes you don't need to yell, argue, or fight. You just need to let people trip over their own arrogance. And in Karen's case, she literally did. So the next time someone decides your property lines don't matter, just remember, patience, proof, and a well-timed plan can teach a better lesson than anger ever could. Because some people only learn the hard way, and on my farm that lesson came with 4 flat tires.